This video is my most important video yet, and I will most likely end my videos here. Psychology's purpose was, and is, to control all behavior through the control of sexual behavior. I will definitively prove this in this video, and I'll give all my money and take all my videos down if anyone can prove otherwise. The aggravation of sexual energy leads to violence, including rape. Drugging is a form of an occupying or government's force to suppress sexual behavior and the desire to lash out to counter their control of sexuality or to victimize a random person, etc. They violently, politically, socially, coercively, financially, psychologically, and with drugs and rape control sexual behavior, and it is on a subconscious level more often than not. Yes, they have sex clubs that help them balance themselves as they do it. Do any of you doubt that the best way to balance oneself is to have sex with the most desirable thing that your heart desires, right? A woman, a man, a boy, this kind of woman, etc. Lesbians, the LGBT community, white supremacists, and all of these Sophia knowledge kind of elite puppets you see dominating society are represented in these clubs almost, completely, really. People like me certainly aren't, I'll tell you that. The sexual revolution, where did it come from? What did it include? I will define terms that prove my point definitively. Psychosexual, of or relating to the mental, emotional, and behavioral aspects of sexual development. Of or relating to mental or emotional attitudes concerning sexual activity. Of or relating to the physiological psychology of sex. Think about these studies being done by corporate groups and special interest groups, and these groups I defined earlier, and how they play out in our society. Of course, it equals social control through sexual control, right? Psychoanalysis, treating disorders, emotional disorders, by talking freely about one's childhood and one's dreams. Psychoactive, affecting the mind or behavior. They use the example of psychoactive drugs. They use toxic psychoactive drugs and psychochemicals to play out political dissidence, in case you haven't been paying attention. Psychobiology, the study of mental life and behavior in relation to other biological processes. Psychodrama, an improvised dramatization designed to afford catharsis, which means to cleanse or to purge, elimination of a complex by bringing it out consciously, bringing it to consciousness and affording it expression. They use the example of getting rid of pity or fear. Think about military psychology, which includes a degree of psychodramas. I'm not quite sure how this plays out, but certainly it must. And more commonly, and a better example perhaps, is Hollywood, triggering rape survivors' emotions when they see movies. And what is the ultimate effect of this? It is an induced psychological state. So what is the purpose of it? It says for social relearning, for one or more of the participants from whose story the plot is abstracted. So they'll make a story that resonates with a lot of people, right? They'll rape a lot of people with fraternities or in the military, child abuse at home in similar ways. Then they'll have stories in the Hollywood that triggers these things. It is an improvised dramatization, okay, of these events that happen commonly in our society. I'm having some trouble with my eyes right now and my ears, so bear with me. Psychodynamics, the psychology of mental or emotional forces or processes, or process development, especially in early childhood, and their effects on behavior and mental states in terms of mental or emotional forces or processes. Also, motivational forces acting especially at the unconscious level. So when we talk about the unconscious level, the psychodynamics, these people are manipulating things in a way that controls behavior subconsciously. And yes, this is not some kind of crazy conspiracy theory. This is the result of hundreds of years of psychology Going back to the 18th century, early 18th century, psychiatry was coined by Johann Christian Rell in 1818, and yes, Germans were instrumental in bringing us psychiatry and psychology in their modern forms. And these are just more modern kind of Western terms for ideas that have been with us in the West, certainly since ancient Greece, where a bunch of sexually immoral, rapacious instruments of evil have studied these things in order to spread Western civilization from this kind of sexually immoral, control sexual behavior, sexual sadist, Marquis de Sade kind of perspective. Psychogenesis, the origin and development of mental functions, traits, or states, to development from mental, that's number 2, development from mental as distinguished from physical origins. So basically the psychogenic, okay, so psychogenesis. Okay, the first book in the Bible, Genesis. This is a kind of Western psychology presentation of Christianity, which is an African martial arts kind of religion repackaged for the West through the Middle East. Okay, and where the Roman Empire occupied the Middle East. Okay, so, and Egypt as well. So psychogenesis. Genesis, the origin and development of mental functions, traits, or states. How do these mental states come about? How are they developed? Number 2, development from mental as distinguished from physical origins. How do we get these people to develop themselves, controlling their mentals? Psychobiography. Biography written from a psychodynamic or psychoanalytic perspective. So this person's biography, right, this guy that we're targeting, we're looking at it from a kind of psychodynamic or psychoanalytic perspective. Remember, talking freely, what we know about this person's life, maybe, watching them with our surveillance state. And psychodynamics, the psychology of mental or emotional forces or processes developing, especially in early childhood, and their effects on behavior and mental states in terms of mental or emotional forces or processes, and also motivational forces acting, especially at the unconscious level. I encourage you to watch this video 5-6 times until you get my point completely. All right. Psychohistory, analysis of a historical person or figure using psychology and psychological and psychoanalytic methods. Okay, so let's think of Freud, let's think of Hitler, right? Let's analyze them this way. What made him this way? What made him successful? What made him fail, right? How can we use psychology to create the perfect man? And of course the term figure, right? What are his physical characteristics and how do they interact with his mental state? What any physical ailments? Is he in good shape? What is the shape of his body? Is he a big brute? Is he a martial artist, etc.? All right. Psycholinguistics, the study of linguistic behavior as conditioning and conditioned by psychological factors. Of course, speak proper grammar, right? Conditioning. European conditioning, regeneration for many generations. Their body, their physique, their vocal cords, etc. Their mind is wired in a way so they have less linguistic problems when they're speaking a Western dialect. Who would have thought, right? And how this plays out in your conditioning and your behavior. Ebonics. Condition them to speak Ebonics. Set them up to fail, and so on. Psychological moment. The occasion when the mental atmosphere is most certain to be favorable to the full effect of an action or event. If I want to make everyone gay, if I want to produce this movie, if I want to introduce this idea, how can I first create the proper atmosphere or psychological moment for me to then apply it? So timing and application and strike, and so on, striking, all these are martial arts principles. And of course, I'm more intelligent than they are. My senses are more refined. So they have to come together as bitches and dull my senses and try to cheat me out of my place. And so they can lead you all into this sexual nightmare, this immoral, sexual sadistic nightmare. Sexual sadist, dream in your nightmare. Psychologism. Psychologism. So basically psychologism. A theory that applies psychological conceptions to the interpretation of historical events or logical thought. Now, this is key. What does psych mean in the first place? Well, it has several key definitions. 1, to anticipate correctly the intentions or actions. So the whole purpose of psychology is to groom you so they can anticipate what you're going to do and control you that way. The thoughts you thought are your own are actually put there by them. They give you a list. Be a basketball player. Be this, be this, be this, so that we can control you. If you transcend and rise above and become who you're meant to be and fall in line to the divine, with the divine logos from the African martial artist perspective, which is the only proven spiritual perspective, a spiritual harmony with the Creator. Okay? Then you're not doing something that they can predict. You're moving with God, who is unpredictable, who is far beyond their realm of understanding, their ability to understand. Anyway, to analyze or figure out, to intimidate or scare, to psych out, right? To make psychologically ready for performance. And of course, sexual performance is key there. So you might say, well, if I induce this kind of angry energy into the sex cults who are like, take that, right? They're having sex with the type of person they want, and they're controlling society together and kind of smile. Oh, they're calm in public, If I get knocked off balance, I'm going to find the type of person that's going to restore my balance. If it was a black person, I'm going to use a black guy that looks like him. I'm going to use a black woman. I'm going to use my ideal woman. I'm going to use her. Pow, pow, take that, right? What happens, secretaries, Eros, Aries, God of war, Eros, sexual activity, carnal desire, right? So you have these people in the business places having sex with these sexy secretaries who are dressed sexy in a way so that they can express that frustration, so they can rebalance themselves, giving them and their network and their buddies an uncanny ability to control society in a despicable upper hand. Okay, so how can we then create the top martial artist from our perspective? You cannot. You cannot create in reality the top martial artist, but you can use drugs, technology, and psychology to create some kind of angry reaction to make somebody possibly break my record. But that is artificial. You may as well be breaking my record with a robot, because that is not the Spirit of God coming into man, expressing himself. That is drugs, technology, and psychology. These things are unnatural, they're evil, and they're not naturally how you bring about God's speed with righteous indignation. It is an imitation of frustration, of righteous indignation, which is really frustration, sexual frustration, and being provoked. I encourage you to watch this again with an emphasis on the definition of psychosexual, psychodynamics, psychoanalysis, psychoactive drugs. Make sure you understand these terms: psychobiography, psycholinguistics, psychological moment, psychologism, and psych. Okay, understand all these terms and how they're being applied through the government, through this military industrial complex, prison industrial complex, this corporate state, to control your states of mind in a way that's friendly to the corporate globalist merchants who are at odds, first and foremost, and perhaps only with the divine order of God, a light temple moral order, versus moral relativists who use sex cults and sexual frustration and complexes to control you. Thank you.